Let's be real, for a lot of Australians, the dream of owning your own home feels like it's getting further and further away. But what if there was a new way to get a foot on the ladder? Well, today we're going to take a guided tour of the government's brand new Help to Buy scheme, a plan designed to do exactly that. So, here's our game plan. We're going to start with the big problem everyone's facing, then we'll dive right into the scheme itself. How it works, who it's actually for, and probably the most important part, how it could help you get the keys to your very own place. All right, first things first. Let's talk about the problem this whole scheme is trying to solve. I'm talking about that massive, massive hurdle of just getting onto the property ladder in the first place. Does that question hit a little close to home? Yeah, for so many people trying to buy a house right now, it's this constant worry. You're saving as hard as you can, but it just feels like the goalposts are always shifting, right? And here's the thing you've got to remember. It is not just you. This isn't some personal failing. It's the reality of the market. That gap between what you can save and the deposit you actually need has just become this giant canyon. And that's the exact problem Help to Buy is trying to build a bridge over. Okay, so we've established the problem. Now, what's the solution the government is bringing to the table? Let's get into it. Help to Buy. Okay, so what is it, really? At its core, you can think of it like a partnership. Instead of you having to carry the whole financial weight, the government basically steps in as a silent partner. They put in a big chunk of the cash, and in return, they own a piece of the property alongside you. So the whole point is to give your buying power a serious boost. It's meant to make those homes that felt completely out of reach, well, suddenly a real possibility. It just makes your deposit stretch a whole lot further. And this isn't some tiny little pilot program either. We're talking 10,000 spots up for grabs every single financial year. That's a pretty major initiative that's hoping to make a real dent in this whole housing affordability crisis. So that's all the theory. But what does this actually look like when the rubber hits the road? Let's crunch some numbers with a real-world example to see how this whole shared equity thing actually works. All right, let's meet Rob. We're going to follow him as he tries to buy an $800,000 home. By walking through his situation, we can make all these percentages and big numbers feel a lot more concrete. Okay, check this out. Here's the breakdown for Rob's purchase. That tiny little slice, that's his deposit, just 2%. Then the bank comes in with a much smaller, more manageable loan for 68%. And that big chunk left over, that's the government, stepping in with a full 30% of the purchase price. Whoa. Let's just pause on that number for a second. $240,000. That is a huge amount of money. That's the government's contribution that makes this whole thing possible for Rob. It's an absolutely game-changing sum that he doesn't have to borrow from the bank. So here's how it works in a nutshell. You have to come up with at least a 2% deposit. The government then tops that up, contributing up to 40% for a brand new home or 30% for an existing one. Now, the really key thing to get your head around is that because they're a partner, they also share in the future value change, whether the property value goes up or down. This all sounds pretty good, right? But the big question is, who can actually get it? Let's run through the eligibility checklist and see if this scheme might be for you. First up, let's talk about income. The limits here are really clear. If you're applying by yourself, your annual taxable income has to be at or below $100,000. If you're applying as a couple or a single parent, that threshold goes up to $160,000. Simple as that. Now, besides income, there are a few other boxes to tick. You've got to be an Aussie citizen over 18, and you need to have that minimum 2% deposit ready to go. And this next one is critical. You can't own any other property, and that means anywhere in the world. And finally, you have to actually live in the house. This is not for building an investment portfolio. Okay, so let's say you've gone through the checklist and you tick all the boxes. What does the actual journey to getting those keys look like? Let's map it out, step by step. The whole process is meant to be pretty straightforward. You'd start with a quick check online to see if you're eligible. Then you go to a participating lender. You don't deal with the government directly on this part. They'll help you get conditional approval, which basically saves your spot for 90 days. Then you go find a place, get your offer accepted, finish up the paperwork, and you move in. Now, this is a really, really important part of the scheme to understand. It is not meant to be a permanent arrangement. It's designed to be a launchpad to get you started. So, what's the end game? You should think of it exactly like that, a bridge. The whole point is to get you across that initial affordability gap with the goal of you eventually owning 100% of your property all by yourself. The scheme is just there to help you make that first big step. So there are basically three ways to get to that 100% ownership goal. You can make extra little payments over time to slowly buy back the government's share, or you could refinance or use savings to buy back their entire chunk in one go. And finally, if you decide to sell the house down the line, the government's share just gets paid out from the money you make on the sale. So that's the Help to Buy scheme in a nutshell. It's a really bold move in the housing market, right? It's trying to crack open the door to home ownership for a whole new generation. And it definitely raises a pretty big question. With house prices being what they are, could this kind of shared equity model be the new normal for how people get their first home? It's certainly food for thought.